Welcome to Tilma, our monthly podcast that delves into all aspects of my 7-year pastoral plan on evangelization. Everything from exciting community events around the diocese to a deep dive into Pope Francis's 10 hopes for the 2025 Jubilee year. I'm Bishop Dolan, your host, and I'm joined today by Father Estevan Wetzel and Ted Ebner from the Office for Prison Ministry. I sure would like to change that to Prison Ministry and Social Restorative Justice, which is going to be kind of the topic of our discussion today. Today, we'll be talking about a theme that has been on Pope Francis's heart, and that is hope for prisoners and restorative justice. So, welcome, Father Wetzel.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. So why don't we just get to know each other a little bit? Father Wetzel, how in the world did you get into this saddle of working with prison ministry?
Well, Bishop, I honestly thought I'd just be continuing at John Paul II High School. And then what ended up happening about a year ago, it's around that time that I had a cousin pass away through some encounter with the police or whatnot. So this desire in my heart is just coming forth of like, what about them, Lord? Who's going to take care of them? And then Kevin Stars was retiring. And so it kind of just morphed into, I think I'm the one to take his spot.
Yeah, and I was happy that it worked out very well because I was already thinking, Father Estevan might be our guy. Mm-hmm. And so Kevin Stars had been here for, about 20 years prior to, and he kept this office for prison ministry running for a while. And between you and Ted, we continue this effort. And there's another Father, Brad LePage, who's also assisting right there on site in some of the prisons and jails. But Ted, tell us about how you came on board. And that was not too long ago.
Correct, yes. So I started officially about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Beforehand, I'd spent 15 years in the private sector and was in a group insurance traveling job. And I'd volunteered through prison ministry in Colorado. And when I came down here, I'd gotten in touch with Kevin and started volunteering. And through the Keno program here that I took, that was the beautiful 2-year program, I met a lot of people who'd worked full-time in ministry. Mm-hmm. And I really became pretty jealous of having to have Jesus with you all the time, where I had to go back and sell insurance. So that kind of motivated me to reach out. And through God's, divine love, he put me in touch with Kevin, and the timing worked out really good. So,
well, I think it's been a really fantastic opportunity for us to have the two of you land here, and now with Father LePage, that's going to be a blessing as well.
Absolutely.
And I understand that you're going to be working toward getting more priest volunteers lined up. They have to get their cards and all of that to offer better services in our prisons and our jails. And so what's that process like? Why is it? I mean, you don't have to go into detail, but how heavy is that?
The process is pretty straightforward because our different facilities, state, federal, and county, all have desires, and by law they are required to offer different religious services depending on the need. And so it is a background check, and you do have to take a drug test, but It is pretty straightforward where if you are vetted by your sponsoring agency, then you go through the process, everything looks good, and within a few month period, you are able to receive a badge.
And I understand, of course, we're not only looking for priests, but also we have deacons as well, and religious, I'm assuming, and just wonderful lay people and people whose heart is dedicated toward assisting those who are in prison. As Jesus says, when I was in prison, you visited me.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing is the prisons and the county jails really push, if you're ex-incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, they do want you to come back and work into the prisons and jails with other people.
Yeah.
So they really do open it up for everyone. They know everyone has something to contribute to these prisoners. And again, if you've gone through that in your life and you're willing to come back and speak to how you restored yourself, that is a really big deal for the prisons. And again, they really welcome that.
And I think one of the wonderful things about the concept of restoration is this is obviously pointing directly into what Jesus would expect of us, that we go that extra mile, we turn the other cheek, we do all of the right things by praying for our not only our neighbor, but also for our enemy, loving our enemy, forgiving, all of those things that Jesus talks about. It really speaks to a different form of justice, doesn't it? And Pope Francis really wanted us to consider that. He writes in his papal bull for this Jubilee year of hope, which is called Spes non confundit, that he writes, drawing from Isaiah the prophet, he says, "The Lord has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives and release to the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he says, Jesus made those words his own at the beginning of his ministry, presenting himself as the fulfillment of the year of the Lord's favor. In every part of the world, Pope Francis says, believers and their pastors in particular should be one in demanding dignified conditions for those in prison, respect for their human rights, and above all, the abolition of the death penalty. And a provision at odds with this death penalty, a provision at odds with Christian faith as one that eliminates all hope of forgiveness and rehabilitation. So when we're speaking of, say, the death penalty, and the Arizona Catholic bishops have written on this a number of times, and sadly we're going to be resuming this in a short while. I believe March 19th is our next execution here. That to me is Exhibit A of, in essence, a lack of the gospel message of restoration and restorative justice. What I see is that retributive justice, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a lot of people will appeal to the Bible. They'll say, the Bible says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But in fact, Jesus, he's the one who quotes an older law, but what he basically says is, but what I say to you is, offer no resistance to injury, turn the other cheek, love your enemy, and so on. And that's why I think this office for prison ministry and restorative justice is even more than just kind of getting a person back into the mainstream, but actually getting all of humanity to sort of change their hearts a little bit and move us away from that eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and really to the true gospel message, which is restoration. What say you?
The best experience I think that Father and I could speak to that is when we go in and we speak with inmates, we never ask them what they're in for, anything like that. It's the same message of love, like you mentioned through the Gospels of Christ, that, I'm going to relentlessly pursue you, unconditionally love, and that's all that matters. So again, we don't ever go in and get the details of what has happened in the past. We're only looking forward and really expressing the message of God not being mad at them and God unconditionally loving them as well.
Yeah. And that, to me, that's part of the wraparound service. That's why, as a chaplain and the head of this office, it's so important to Father Wetzel. I think you saw that deep need. We know that we can't do anything regarding the actual incarceration or the release of prisoners, but we can release their hearts and open their hearts. So tell me a little bit about that, maybe some tangibles if you have.
Well, what I'm reminded of is that people will often come to me and ask, what do you do? What do you say? And the reality is I'm coming from a background where I remember sitting outside of Madison Street Jail downtown in the car. I was afraid someone was going to take me or something, as my mom left me in the car. I was safe, but she was visiting my brother. And then I'm thinking of other different family members. And in all of that, I was never fearful of this ministry because it's like, oh, they're family. They're people just like me. They've made mistakes and different decisions need to be made with regards to penalties or whatnot, but they are just another human being. So then tangibly, when I'm For instance, in the solitary confinement or something, what comes to my mind is Jesus saying, tax collectors and sinners are entering the kingdom before you, where this person who has nothing still has a fundamental dignity and worth. And there's this preciousness that as we have this conversation or this confession or this prayer, that very much the Lord is revealing to them, but then also to myself, this holy ground, this dignity that we both equally have, no matter what decisions we've made along the way.
That's right. And most recently, out of the Vatican came a sort of a summation of our whole theology of human dignity, and I thought it was a very important document, but it really addressed the various forms of. There's the existential dignity where somebody just says, "I am an absolute crumb, and this is the way I'm always going to live." Well, that's not true. Or somebody say, "I'm the best in the world." Well, that's not true either. And then, so that's the existential dignity, and then there's the social dignity where some people are just so oppressed by the economic injustice and so on, where people just have no sense of that, and so they again go to that existential dignity where they just don't feel correct and they don't feel like they're worthy of anything. And then there's the moral dignity where somebody is just habitually having troubles. That it might be mental health related issues, or it could be just true bad decisions and sometimes outright evil decisions that people make. And those can also affect one's basic human dignity that you were referring to, that Pope Francis says, and he's not the originator of this, but in truth, there is an essential human dignity that cannot be annulled. It cannot be annulled because we're all made in the image and likeness of God. So right on, I agree with you 100%. And the whole point of restorative justice, in my mind, is that it peels back all those layers and helps a person through your ministry, helps a person in prison or coming out of prison to remember that there is an essential, innate dignity that they have that cannot be annulled. What more would you have to say about that?
That's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
The main message a lot of times when I'm clear in my head before I go in and speak to prisoners is what is the one message that would really move this person that they need to hear? And a lot of times when I do that prayer, it comes across as the message as God is not mad at you, right? You have this dignity that you were born with. And it doesn't matter if this is the third or fourth time you're in here. He still loves you unconditionally, and he's not mad at you. So don't take this time as a time of punishment where you have to fix yourself only. This is a great time to reach out to Christ. And we explain that through the fact that they're born with this human dignity in the image and likeness of God. And when we can, it's not so much convincing, but when they can realize that and you can kind of see it connect in their head, you see hope.
Right.
Saying that God does love me for who I am. He can separate sin from what I want to be in my life. Yeah. And that tends to really start the self-approval process. Mm-hmm. But it is relating it back to their dignity. That's God-given.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be something that this is only a teaser to a general forum on restorative justice that we will be having here at the Diocese, and hopefully many of you viewers will be able to participate in that because really restorative justice is again not just about the let's say the economic reality or the utilitarian reality of even moving beyond an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and restoring a person back into the mainframe. They could still feel just as crummy. So we need to reach to their spiritual depths and let them know of their human dignity. I find that even within there is a level of advocacy, however, that your office will take on as well. First here in the state of Arizona with the death penalty, which is a shame that we're resuming that. Really a shame. But I would also say that there's also issues regarding the way in which someone is tried. So often we might find one lawyer who's ready to try this person. They find technicalities and they say, we're going to get this person. Or you're going to find another person with technicalities to say, we're going to get this person off. And their technicalities are not based on true justice. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you even hope for even retributive justice, say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth,
Yeah.
But even there, we don't get it, which is an interesting thing. Now, of course, we want to reach way beyond and to that restorative justice. But so we have just a few more minutes. I'm just wondering if you have any other thoughts on this subject.
I'm reminded of a funeral we attended recently for one of our dear friends, Angel. He's younger than me. I was an intern for the Diocese prison ministry with him under Kevin Stars, and he unfortunately passed away recently in a car accident. But what I was reminded of in this small funeral with people that were involved in the prison ministry, Kevin, Ted, and Father Frazier, that it could have just been a statistic, another person gone for unfortunate circumstances. But we knew his heart, how good he was. His family had a lot of troubles, but he would walk a special needs boy to the school and protect him in this more rough neighborhood. He'd wave at everyone. He was so friendly. And I think just to say that the work we're doing is revealing and reverencing that goodness that we're seeing in every person, but especially those who are often neglected or just become a statistic or something different, and how much we loved and we mourned and we cried for the passing of our dear friend who was an intern in this office twice.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. I would say for me, just really the all around being with people. And I would say also something that I didn't realize coming into this position is that a lot of our volunteers, sometimes they leave for summer or whatnot. But the desire to be in the prisons and the jails with the inmates from our volunteers is incredibly high. So, for example, if someone leaves for the summer, we'll get a call on their first day back and say, hey, I'm back from Colorado. Get me back in. I got to go. And this happens throughout the weeks, then the months, multiple times. So someone will call and say, hey, I freed up. Can I take one of these spots? And we really go out of our way to get that person in because it means so much to them.
And that's so fantastic. And I to me, that's what we ultimately would like. It's beyond just the command. Jesus says, when I was in prison, you visited me, and there's sort of this command and this, it's the final judgment thing, and if I don't do it, I'm going to be messed up, I think in truth, these people who are calling you after their vacation, they've gone beyond the command. They've gone from their heart to, this is what I want to do. To me, I think that's a piece of the puzzle that this forum that I hope we can have on restorative justice will really help us to transform our hearts, and more people will be able to embrace that corporal work of mercy, which is visiting the imprisoned, but also visiting those who are walking back into the mainstream. And also, while in prison, I'm sure there are times when you have even visited some of the guards and given them some moral support and spiritual support. So I really thank you very much for being here. And I just wanted to remind you that this is called Tilma. It's thank you for joining us for Tilma. And it's Tilma is part of the 7-year pastoral plan, which is an acronym for Testifica, O Iglesia, a la luz del misterio de amor, or testify, O Church, to the light of the mystery of love. And that's Christ Jesus. He's the light of love. And these two men here in this room find the light of love in those they reach each and every day. So we're so happy to have you. So please like and subscribe and send us your ideas in the comment section for future episodes of Tilma. Have a blessed day.